So I think if you're thinking about a smartphone-free childhood, that also means not handing interactive tablets to younger children, because a tablet is really just like a very large smartphone. And I try to distinguish then in the book between interactive screens, which would be video games, tablets, smartphones, social media, and more passive screens like a television, where you're consuming a content that, is going across the screen, but you're not interacting with it. So the interactive screens are much more addictive. It's much more dopamine hits. It's constant. And that is what we start to see really the harms to a child's developing brain and nervous system. And so what I explained in the book is that not all screens are equal, and I'm specifically focusing on interactive, addictive screens.
Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad you joined us today. This is a topic that I think we could probably talk about all the time, and it would probably be changing in some ways, but there are some vital truths on technology that we're going to talk about today.
And I think that there's lots of different aspects of technology that we can cover. And I really appreciate this interview because it's giving us a kind of slightly different vantage point, a slightly different way of looking at technology. And I think that we could just kind of keep talking about this. We could probably there's probably podcasts out there for parents all about technology.
That's right.
But anyway, we decided to bring in our friend Clare Morell to talk about her book, Tech Exit. So this is going to be a great starting point for you. And if it's really interesting to you, you can go and buy her book. But anyway, I think it's going to be really helpful for parents.
Yeah. All right. So before we jump into that conversation, we have some fun things coming up.
Yes.
First is Alicia is doing a Women Wonderfully Made webinar,
right.
Meaning this is for moms, right? It's just for moms that have children or daughters.
Preparing for adolescence. So you have a daughter who is getting ready for adolescence. So actually, sometimes moms come to this webinar who have like maybe 7 or 8 year olds and they're kind of looking ahead.
Yeah.
Or even if you have a daughter who is in the teenage years right now, we're going to be talking about what moms need to do to guide their daughters through this time of adolescence. And and so we'll get some...
It will be helpful for mom with daughters in the pre-adolescent and even in the early adolescent time frame. Okay.
And anybody who comes to this webinar, you will be entered for a chance to win a free course, Women Wonderfully Made course.
Ooh.
So if you register
Bonus.
and then you come and you attend, then I'll put during the webinar, I'm going to give somebody's name
names.
who is on the webinar and they get a free course. So
awesome.
Yeah, check it out.
Sign up. Last time you did this, you had hundreds, if not even 1,000 moms that signed up for it. So make sure you tune in for that. And information for that is on the Messy Family website, messyfamilyproject.org, to sign up for that webinar.
Yes. And we are also going to be in Cincinnati. So if you're in that area,
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yes, register for the Rural Woods Gala. Rural Woods is a great partner for us. They promote theology of the body curriculum for schools, but also they have a psychological service institute, and our daughter actually works there, is a counselor there. But anyway, we're going to be the speakers there. And if you're in the Cincinnati area, we would love to see you. So come to the gala.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to jump into this conversation we had with Clare Morell. Is that how you pronounce the last name? I think so. Okay. But really, Tech Exit, it talks as she's younger than we are, but looking at some great statistics, great insight, and a really wonderful approach that we really want you to listen to this conversation. So listen in. Clare, I am so happy you're here because this is an issue both near and dear to our hearts, but it's something that a lot of parents get frustrated with. So thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were just saying before we hit record that the fact that so this book just came out in June. So it's very, very relevant. Yeah. Talking about the technologies that because things change so fast. I mean, were things changing like as you were writing this book? Were you like, oh my goodness, I have to go back and like redo things to keep up with the technology?
Yes, that is definitely I think like quintessential challenge of writing a book on technology is that technology is always changing. It's always emerging very quickly. And so something I kept in mind even in writing it was just, trying to address the need of the moment with smartphones and social media, but really trying to actually draw out practices parents could adopt really towards any kind of digital technology, whatever the newest technology might be. What kind of principles should we approach as parents for thinking about technology and kids? And so I wanted it to be not only relevant to this time, though I think it is, but my hope for the book is that 10 years from now, it will actually still have great advice, practical tips, relevant principles for parents to confront whatever the new next technology is. So I hope it has both the relevance to the moment, but then some underlying principles that will stand the test of time.
That's what parents need, because I really applaud your work in tech policy. I think we need people like you kind of articulating, thinking through, deliberating, and advocating for good solutions from a policy standpoint. But the best solution to the challenges that we're facing today are engaged, aware, and loving parents, right? And so what was your impetus to write this book? Because we see the need for it, but what kind of pushed you over the edge?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm so glad you asked. So my last several years, my work has focused in the tech policy space. And so I came into this work trying to help think through what laws do we need to really help support parents in better protecting their kids. And so that was my background into the research was really the tech policy space. And what my research of the harms of social media and smartphones had convinced me of was that a smartphone-free childhood was necessary. And so I decided I wasn't going to give smartphones and social media to my own kids. And I would get asked a lot for advice by parents who knew I was in this space, or parents I would speak with at public events and say, what can we do? What should we do? And I would say, well, I would recommend not giving smartphones or social media to your children. But I had young kids, as we were talking about, they're all under the age of 5. And so I realized I hadn't navigated the teen years successfully. And so the reason for this book was really, I wanted to set out to kind of prove to parents that this was possible, that not only is a smartphone-free childhood necessary, but it's actually possible.
Yeah.
And here is how other families have done this, so that I could really offer parents a very practical guidebook and a roadmap. And before writing it, though, I did read a lot of books on parenting and tech, because I wasn't going to waste my time writing a book if someone had already written it. But what I found was that no book was kind of holding out this other option that, smartphones don't need to be an inevitable part of childhood. There is another way. Here's how to do it. Most of the books acknowledged the harms, but the solutions offered really fell short of what to me felt like the full necessary solution. And so it was mainly books about screen time limits, parental controls, where my research had convinced me those were not enough to protect our children from the kind of harms that we've seen from smartphones and social media. So that was the why behind the book, was trying to help parents on the front lines, showing them that this was both necessary and possible.
So when you say, I'm just to define terms, so people can understand what your proposal is, can you define a smartphone-free childhood? Are you saying no screens, and what is childhood? And, what exactly are you talking about when you say that?
Yes. So the focus of the book is on smartphones and social media. And when I say childhood, I mean through the teen years. And so that's even in the subtitle of the book. I say a practical guide to freeing kids and teens from smartphones. Because I think sometimes people think, oh, childhood, so 13 or 14 is okay for a smartphone.
Exactly. That's yeah.
No, so I'm trying to push this as far off to adulthood as possible. And then what I would say is, on the question of other screens, while my research focused on smartphones and social media, other interactive screens are implicated. So I think if you're thinking about a smartphone-free childhood, that also means not handing interactive tablets to younger children, because a tablet is really just a very large smartphone. And I try to distinguish then in the book between interactive screens, which would be video games, tablets, smartphones, social media, and more passive screens like a television, where you're consuming a content that, is going across the screen, but you're not interacting with it. So the interactive screens are much more addictive. It's much more dopamine hits. It's constant. And that is what we start to see really the harms to a child's developing brain and nervous system. And so what I explained in the book is that not all screens are equal, and I'm specifically focusing on interactive, addictive screens, where the design of these products is inherently addictive, particularly in the period of life of childhood and adolescence. And I do kind of give other guiding principles for how to think about screens more generally. But the lines, I think, will fall differently for different families on that. But where I am most clear is trying to say no to smartphones and social media during childhood. And that also means really resisting the kind of tablets and video games as well. And then television, again, I would, try to minimize that and use it really sparingly and very kind of on purpose with a clear intention, not making it a daily habit. But that's not where I'm trying to really draw the line. I think those, families will have to make their own decisions and wisdom on that. And I give some principles in the book. But what it is making a case for is no smartphones through childhood, including the teen years.
Yeah, and I do think there's some people who are like, I don't know, I don't know about that, because I think that most parents who are at least listening to the show are very concerned about smartphones, the internet, social media in general with their kids, and I think if you're not sure right now, listen to this. If you're don't turn it off just yet. We're gonna get into what we're gonna let Claire make the case, because I think this is really vital, right? I think there was a lot of people, and I know I experienced this as a parent, that I was so frustrated sometimes that I just wanted to throw the phone across the room or get rid of it entirely. And so I don't believe there are many people who say wait and delay, but you're really saying, let's just not go there. Let's just keep our kids out of that. And I know Meg Meeker has talked about different things like that, right? So, and others out there, but there really isn't a book that says, let's exit the tech for our kids. So, all right, but you've got to make a good case for this. And I know you do in the book, right?
Yeah.
But I guess I want to just go right into, okay, so for a parent who, every child says, well, everybody's got one. And, it's the standard response that all kids say for almost anything that parents are uncomfortable with. Everyone's doing it, right?
Yeah.
And we do want to raise kids that are countercultural. We want to raise our kids to the fullness of their potential. But what is the big deal? Come on, Claire. What is some of the harms and or threats that you see that come into play here?
Yes, I'll do my best to give a quick summary, because there's obviously a lot that I could
just
be
give them a tease of it.
Yeah, so I'll give you a tease. I think most parents know that the screens are inherently harmful, right? Because the strategies are trying to put limits or controls to minimize that. But there is this understanding, we don't put screen time limits on a kid like riding their bike or playing Legos. There's not something inherently harmful in that. And so I think there's already a recognition that something about the design of these technologies is harmful. It is addictive to a child's brain. What I feel for parents, though, is they've been told by the tech companies, your child can use our products and you will, avoid these harms and dangers if you just put screen time limits and parental controls in place. So I just want to offer two things. Anecdotally, parents who I say in the book kind of fall into this screen time trap. They were trying to resist the smartphone. They gave into the social pressures and they thought the screen time limits was going to be the solution. Will tell you it is exhausting. Like you were just describing, wanting to throw the phone across the room because, and I'm what I'm trying to explain in the book is it's not that something's wrong with your child. It is the technology is designed to do that to them. They will always want more. The time limit will never be enough. And so just the nature of the technology creates a constant friction between parent and child. A mom said to me, she's like, I feel like it's just me standing between my child's underdeveloped brain and this drug dispensing machine because they always want more. And so I try to explain in the book the brain research studies show us that the brains of like heavy users of social media resemble the brains of people addicted to highly addictive drugs, that it's having the same impact on the brain. And so we've kind of treated screens more like sugar, like, okay, don't give them too much, but a little bit in moderation is okay. And what I'm trying to explain is actually the brain research is showing us like the amount of dopamine, how highly addictive the screens are, acts more on the brain like a highly addictive drug. Other research has come out, the University of North Carolina, that like these 12 to 13-year-old studies they did of kids using social media, the kids who were frequent checkers of social media, not even saying they were on the platform itself for very long, but just the habitual checking of it, like having the account, checking it constantly throughout the day, led to divergent brain development over time. So there is a very real impact the technology is having, particularly on a child's developing brain that's not fully formed.
Right.
Another scientist said that like a kid's brain on these technologies is like all gas pedal with no brakes, because adults have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, decision making, impulse control, self-control, and a child doesn't have that. And so they will always want more. And again, it's not the child's fault. This is the effect that technology was intended to have, and the nature of dopamine, which is what's released, every time they get a notification or they level up in the game or they get a new follower or new like, is that dopamine is released, and dopamine just creates craving. It doesn't actually ever produce satisfaction. It's to incentivize us to do that behavior again. And so no time limit's ever enough. And the last thing I will say is that the screen time limit doesn't map on to a child's mental or emotional time. They can live in the virtual world long after they leave it, because even if they're only on 15 minutes of Instagram, because of the dopamine, they are constantly thinking about what's happening on the app. What are they missing out on? Who's liked their post? And so they like inhabit that world long after they leave it. And that was recounted to me anecdotally by many parents saying, we thought 20 minutes of this video game every day would be okay. But what happened was they were like, that is what our son's life became oriented around. All he wanted to do was play the video game, because it is such a compulsion inducing pull. So they were like, all day, he was just waiting for that 20 minutes. It became what his life revolved around. And so my point of the book is that the nature of these technologies by their design is so inherently addictive that even a small amount is really deformative to a child's natural healthy development. And we see that even just in the brain research.
Right. And actually I was thinking about that when you were saying about the TV versus the interactive screen. And there was a period of time in my life when my kids were younger that you kind of think like when they didn't have like touch screens, but they had just like a computer, with the mouse that they would like play like learning games and things on. There was a part of me that was like, oh, well, this is better for them than just passively watching TV because this is interactive. But what I hear you saying now is that no, it's actually worse because it is more pleasurable, but it's pleasurable and producing that craving to want it again and again, right? And this is true for even learning games. This is all things. Like, I just want to draw that out for parents.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you raising that. And I actually think this is another thing that's been challenging for parents, is that they've kind of been advertised that these tablet games, like these educational apps, will be really good developmentally for their kids. But because these like dopamine responses that they're inducing, it ends up still being incredibly addicting, even and dysregulating of their nervous system. So I talk about this in the book about doctors who are finding that screens either mimic or exacerbate symptoms of autism and ADHD. And what the doctor who's seen this explains is that the kind of screens and the interactions from screens is dysregulating of a child's developed nervous system. It kind of puts them in like a hyper fight or flight mode, this state of hyper arousal that that over time, she says this happens even if it's a limited amount of time over each day, but over time, that cumulative effect is that the child's nervous system is really dysregulated. And so what she found was doing a 30-day digital detox for her patients before treating them for the symptoms. In some cases, eliminated these kids' symptoms entirely. The kind of tantrums, poor focus, emotional dysregulation, that they didn't actually have autism or ADHD. The screen had induced these symptoms. And then for patients who genuinely did have an underlying condition, she found without any other treatment, just 30 days off of all the screens, that cut their symptoms in half. And anecdotally, I share a story of this family who they were trying to kind of do the right things for their sons. One of their sons had autism, and they were kind of told, one of his therapists actually used a tablet with him and did a lot of these educational games. And so they thought that this was good for him. But anyway, all that to say, their younger son was really struggling with symptoms of ADHD. He was told he wasn't ready for kindergarten, and they felt like they had reached rock bottom. And some friends of theirs said, we just did a screen detox. I think this could be helpful for your family. And they really thought it was going to be impossible. So they were not convinced, but they said, you know what? We will try it. We've tried everything else. And what does it hurt to do 30 days? They said the first 2 weeks were really hard. Like these screens really do create strong habits. And so kind of undoing those habits took time. But then they made it to 30 days and they saw these amazing benefits in their kids who had really been, she says, she was honestly like, they were glued to the iPads. We did iPad time all the time. And so the most remarkable part of their story is that not only then did their youngest son, his symptoms of ADHD drastically reduced. He was ready for kindergarten. He was able to focus in class. He wasn't getting into fights with other kids anymore. Like his behavior improved and changed. But they were most surprised that their middle son, who has autism, had massive improvements. He had always been behind academically. He was making straight A's. He had always struggled socially. And then he made the club basketball team and started to form real friendships. And so the state support coordinator who would visit their house every month to check on their son with autism said, I wish every family that I visit would understand the power of going off screens. Like, I wish every kid were showing the progress that your son is making, because most homes I walk into, the child is on a video game or glued to a tablet, and they often don't even look up at me and make eye contact. And so I think what those testimonials just said to me, that something about the screens is not good for a child's nervous system or their development, and that actually taking the screens away can really improve their behavior and even improve some of these conditions like that poor focus or tantrums that you're seeing in a child that lead parents to think maybe my son has ADHD or autism, but in a lot of cases, it's really induced by the screens, which is crazy.
Yeah. Because when you realize that there is a need for kids, both from a psychological, physiological, mental development, that there's some negative harms that are coming from it. But it's also, we've talked about this quite a bit, that it's also an experience block for things that kids are naturally and ought to be developmentally going through. Like when they're younger, that they really need the physical motion, and the screens keep them more sedentary, as they're developing their independent view of self, in the adolescent time, right? And they're getting caught up in this peer social media place. There are both the what they're missing out on and how they're being deformed, if you will, in that.
You know what? I wanted to. I want to get to one of my pet peeves, and I'm hoping you'll give me some ammunition. Okay, go to talk to schools. Okay, so I was a substitute teacher in a school like just a couple years ago. I said, hey, you know what? I'll help out our local Catholic school. Went in the kindergarten class. They have these smart boards, and the teachers told me there are two things that made me want to just crawl the walls. Number one, put on a math lesson for the kids. And it was literally like blocks and a voice, like showing the kids 2 + 2 = 4, all of that. Second thing, and I was like, isn't the teacher supposed to be doing? And I didn't do it. I was just like, I can do that myself. And the second thing was during the get your wiggle time out, they put on this video. They were like, oh, play this video. The kids love it. It literally reminded me of one of those brainwashing videos where it was people dancing and flashing lights. And they were like, oh no, the kids love it. Put it on. And then the kids, and I was like, what happened to head and shoulders, knees and toes? Like, you know,
Are we that old? I don't know.
I cannot believe it.
No.
But so what would you say to schools like that who have made this investment in smart boards? Is there research to show either that it's harmful or not helpful to have screens in schools?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. I think schools is one of the actually biggest challenges to parents. I hear from so many parents that they had really good practices at home, and then the tablet, the Chromebook was forced upon them for their child by the school, and that they were like, a kindergartner. My kindergartner is supposed to be on a tablet. Like, why do they need to be on a tablet in kindergarten? Like, and so I did spend a whole chapter of the book talking about getting screens out of schools, and not just the phones, because a lot of schools are adopting bell-to-bell no phone policies, which is great, but also these educational screens that have crept into schools, and there's a business agenda behind them. The ed tech companies have pushed these to say that this is what's going to improve student learning and performance. It's going to be easier for teachers, all these things. Well, it's not panning out in the data, and I explain that in the book, that the kind of push for this like one-to-one policy, like one laptop per child, is going to solve all of our educational achievement gaps, kind of inequalities. It has not borne out that it actually has not improved academic achievement. In fact, sadly, our academic scores for reading and math are at an all-time low since the 1970s, like in America. They've never been lower. And so this integration and push for technology over the last 10 years has only worsened things, not improved them. And I explain then in the book why that might be. And so I unpack several studies that show that children's brains learn better reading real physical books, writing things out by hand on paper versus doing it on a screen. And so I try to explain, like, paper is better. Kids form stronger reading circuits. They comprehend texts more deeply when they read it on paper versus a screen. And these studies, I mean, one of these came out of Columbia's Teachers College last year, like using brain scans and research found that kids have stronger reading comprehension and reading something in print versus on a screen. And one of these researchers explained that somehow the screen really encourages our brains to skim the information, that we're not like reading it as carefully and as deeply. And so she says, like, she's really concerned about kids reaching full literacy when they are on these screens all the time. And so I would just say, I mean, the screens are like distracting too. Like, even just, it's not just that it's harming their learning outcomes, but I just hear story after story of parents who they're sitting next to these kids in class, and the kid is on so-and-so website playing a game or accessing things they shouldn't. And teachers say that they do their best, but that they can't stay on top of all the students and their different screens and get to them in time. And the IT department, does its best to block things, but there's always new websites coming out. And so it's like a complete game of catch up. So not only is like the screen not the best interface for learning, the screens are incredibly distracting to actual learning, trying to have that happen in the classroom.
Right.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, that's the kind of article I want to like print out and bring it to our administration, who I know cares about kids, and I know that they want kids to succeed. And just because as a parent, like you said, I don't want my 7th grader to have a Chromebook, but I can't refuse it because there are things that they need. But I'm like, look, we are not in poverty. My child has a computer at home. If she needs to access something, the like
internet,
we can
that's
get her.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we're not living, in some remote place or whatever. But it just feels so difficult to have that conversation because maybe the schools feel backed into a corner. Like they have to use them.
I'll say parents don't feel supported in general. And this is true everywhere we go because they don't feel like they have a choice, and that the schools are mandating it and it comes forward. It's like we can opt out of certain things, but we really can't opt out of this tech. And then they always lock them down. So we can't really have any control over them, which means we also can't really police them.
No.
Which then puts a divide. Like I remember when we first, early in our parenting, we had a rule, no device in any room, right? So there was one computer. It was in the main, part of the house and visible for everybody. And it, password protected and, filters and so forth. But then smartphones came out. And the naive parents that we were back as iPhones
2007,
we didn't think about it. And then they brought a computer, essentially a very small, but very, very powerful computer into their room. And we never even connected until, shortly thereafter. But it's like, but now they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're both the smartphones, the Chromebooks, the iPads, the everything, right? Are there schools that you're aware of that are even saying, let's pause, let's hold back, I don't know. I haven't heard that yet. I'm just curious if in your travels, if you've heard of any schools that are stepping into that space.
No, I'm glad you asked. And I would just say, I do try to encourage parents because I think it does feel like you're very powerless against kind of the school system pushing this. But I just tell parents, I'm like, just make it known to the school that you don't like this, because I do think if they don't hear from parents, they won't know. They will just assume everyone's okay with it. And I think every parent that does speak up and says, hey, we really don't want our children on Chromebooks, that does make a difference. And particularly where I'm seeing a difference right now is that a lot of these schools got these screens during COVID to do distance learning. And And now they're actually falling apart, they're breaking down. And so school districts are having to consider whether they're going to replace or refurbish all these screens. And it's very expensive. And so I have heard of a couple school districts, parents spoke up. They said they didn't like them. They were facing this budget decision. They're like, this is going to be really expensive to replace them all. And so they decided not to. And I think that is a huge win. And so I would just say to parents, don't be afraid to speak up, because when they are then making these budget decisions or how they're going to go forward, you want them to know that they don't have to replace the screens. And so I'm encouraged, some school districts, this is including public schools, are deciding we're not going to replace the COVID screens. We're just going to go back to not having screens. And so, and then I will say there's been kind of a resurgence, at least several schools in our area, of some classical Christian schools that are really just doing books and paper, that they aren't doing the ed tech screens. And so
you mean the way that children have learned for hundreds of years may actually work? What?
Yes. So I do think there's a growing movement. I'm meeting more and more schools that are talking about how we're having our kids complete assignments by hand. And if they have to do a paper that needs to be typed, they may use the home computer to do that, but they're not having every kid on a tablet. They're not using the screens to do learning during the school day. And so I do think we are starting to see the tide turn a little bit, but I do kind of offer some examples of what schools can do in that chapter of the book.
That's really important. And really in your book, Tech Exit, you say it's a positive no, right? In the sense that you're saying no for the sake of your kids, but what are we saying yes to? As we look at, turning away from screens, getting our kids off of some of the smartphones and everything like that, what are you recommending or suggesting as its replacement for parents, right? Because they're
what's the positive message?
Yeah, what's the positive other side of that? Notice this so we can say yes to what?
Exactly. No, I'm so glad that you asked that, because I actually try to explain when I'm describing the book. I'm like, the book is fundamentally positive. It's very hope-filled. It's trying to say this is possible. This is how families have done it. And they are living a life of flourishing. Their kids are happy. They have close relationships with their children. They're also not weird people living off in Luddite bubbles. These are people in your community. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And the biggest misconception is okay, well, this life of saying no to screens must be just this life of total drudgery. And I try to explain, it's the opposite. What they have filled childhood with instead is all these real world goods and relationships and responsibilities. So I do have a kind of whole chapter dedicated to that. I call it trade screens for real life responsibilities. It was my favorite chapter to write. I just loved getting to tell the stories of what these families were doing instead. And I will tell you what really stood out to me is it wasn't just hobbies. They weren't just pursuing arts or music or sports for their kids, though they were doing those things. But they were actually really trying to help their children take on real life responsibilities. So first in the home, training them to be really a contributor to the family. And then as they got older, taking on even more adult-like tasks. And what they said is that for their kids gave their kids such a sense of purpose and satisfaction in hard work and fulfillment to feel like you're really serving other people. And we were really made as humans for these relationships of mutual dependence and obligation. And I think screens so often they divide those relationships and they make us feel like we don't need other people. Like the technology itself can make us very self-reliant and self-dependent. And so taking away the screens and helping children form those real life bonds with their family members, but not just, relationships of love, but also this service to each other was just such a powerful antidote to the screens. And that was something that was remarked upon to me by many of the families was they found service is a really powerful antidote to anxiety. I think a lot of the anxiety we see from screens is because it tells you that the world revolves around you and it's all about who likes you. Like all this sense of like who's approving of me, it's my self-expression and this self-feedback. And so it's really a lot of pressure to have a child's whole world be like, this revolves around you. It really actually caves a child in on themselves. And so what these families found was,
so true.
being off screens, they were helping them have real world relationships, but with like responsibilities to serve other people. And so helping them take on some pretty adult like chores, like families would say, yep, our daughter, she was 10, she became responsible for the grocery shopping. Like in the sense that it was her job to make a list of what needed to be replaced in the pantry and in the refrigerator, put the list together, like help with the weekly food shop. Other, older tweens starting to learn to make meals for the family, like taking ownership of learning to cook for the family. So not just chores like, make your bed and brush your teeth and like kind of these things, which they did too, but actually helping them take on something that takes a little more work, produce this really great sense of satisfaction and that their work was, not just for themselves, it was really fulfilling something in the family. And so I will say what I encourage parents in is that as we're kind of restricting freedoms in the virtual world, which is countercultural in the sense that a lot of their peers have a ton of freedoms and privileges in the virtual world. We want to be gradually, as children age, opening up more real world freedoms and responsibilities for them. And so a lot of these families said, as the child got old enough, they would let them bike to their friend's house independently, or a teen learning to drive and having the freedom of using a family car. And so just, I think, trying to think of ways that if we're restricting the screens and the virtual freedoms, giving our children real world responsibilities and freedoms that help them develop the skills to progress towards adulthood. I think that's something that just really stood out to me of what they were trading screens for. And also just a lot of relational time together. I think these families, like they had these, routines of going on a family walk after dinner or doing a board game night or working on a puzzle together, just things that really brought the family together. And and just gave a lot of joy. These homes were very just joy filled. So I would just say that the positive vision I hold out is just really compelling.
Well, that's really resonates strongly with us because one of the things in our when we do our tech workshops is the what we say is your family culture. Your family culture is immersed in joy, is immersed in the chores and the fun. You've got to fill their life up with that real stuff. So it just resonates so strongly with what we've experienced in our home, as well as what we really believe is the solution. Because our kids were designed for something greater than pure technology, and I do believe that it is a tool that they need to learn how to master. But it's when they're capable and able to really do it, because there's nobody who would throw a little kid the keys to a car, And,
exactly.
And that's and nor would you send your teenager down a dark alley in New York City that they've never traveled before. And we can't pit our kids against $1 billion industry that's trying to develop new customers. And I think that's what is at stake. And I just love that you give a lot of stories, as well as some stats and some science behind this, as well as some policy, whether it be for because you do also then talk about parents advocating for policy solutions as well, right? Which is obviously your forte and your work. But it's like, you package it all together in a way that really makes it accessible and telling that story. I think that's really, really important.
One thing I was, and just hearing you talk about like giving the children more responsibility, which is the way that parents have parented for, since time began, to be honest with you, it really does take a lot more work.
It does.
And I think that there is and I'll be honest with you, I am a parent. And so I think I can say this, that there is a laziness that comes in because in the short term, it's easier to give my kid a screen to get them to calm down or to let my teenager play video games than teaching them how to drive, worrying about them being on a boat out on the river, worrying about them kayaking down some creek somewhere or whatever. But ultimately, that's like what they need. But it's easier for me in the short term. It's not easier in the long term. And I think that's why I think the data is so important to be included in this. So parents can see this is the harm that you're choosing.
What's the risks we're choosing, Because
that's exactly right. Yeah.
No, we did this whole episode on safetyism, like that people are choosing
physical safety over correct developmental things.
Yes. No, and I would say what part of the book, what it's trying to do is to surface these hidden costs of inaction is what I'm saying, where it seems like the screen is this easy solution, but you don't realize it has all these really harmful long-term costs to your child. And, I don't blame parents. Sadly, the screens and how ubiquitous and easy they are to access makes it really easy to just hand a child one when we need them to calm down or to be quiet or to occupy their time. So yes, I try to be clear in the book that the tech exit, I'm not necessarily saying that this is the easier path. I'm saying it is, I'm saying it's the necessary path. And what I will say is I think it's easier in the long run because all these families basically said that it took some short-term effort, costs and involvement, a lot more parental time and attention on the front end, particularly helping children develop those skills or learning how to play independently. But then over time, the child, as they gained more independence, more creativity, imagination, they were more self-entertained. And I do think I try to be clear to parents, this will take some intentionality on your part. It is going to take some short-term costs on the front end, but it's for all these long-term benefits. Whereas the opposite of screens is true. It feels very easy in the short term, but beware, it has all these costs that you may not realize in the moment when you hand that toddler the tablet. And so, I'm trying to kind of surface those costs for parents, but also surface the benefits of just the long-term gains to your child from resisting the screens.
And there's always going to be a pain point. I wanted to do a study sometime of I'm in my mind anyway, I call it the cycle of play. Cycle of play where I have my little one and I say, you need to go downstairs and play, right? And for the first 5 or 10 minutes, they'll be quiet, then they come back up. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, nope, go back downstairs. Then they come up again. No. But if I resist for maybe 10, 15 minutes, then they get over that hump. And all of a sudden they get into something and they're gone playing for 45 minutes, totally involved. But it's almost like they have to get to that deep work, if you will, that they have to get themselves in that brain. Exactly. And that looking to parents all the time but if you keep saying, you can figure it out, go figure it out. Go figure it out.
Boredom's an okay thing to have too.
Boredom is okay. Yes. I think that's another challenge is parents think something, something's wrong if their child's bored. And it's no. Boredom, is the mother of invention.
That's right. Let's go.
They're going to come up with something if they're bored. And
I got into the best trouble and had the most fun and enjoyable things, by being bored.
Yeah. And I think even teaching our kids, life isn't for entertainment. It's not about being constantly amused. There are other things that are very valuable to do in life, including just space for solitude and reflection, time to think and have thoughts to yourself, is actually really important. And if you're constantly being amused or entertained, you're missing out on that deeper contemplation that is necessary. And I love that you said pain points. I try to explain that to parents in the book that resisting the smartphones, there is this kind of getting over the initial hump because there's going to be points of resistance. oh, well, we require
Right.
your child to have an app to be on this sports team, or the like, every
Right.
single one of my
Yeah.
friends has one of these devices that you have to kind
Yeah.
of push through. But then what all these parents said is once they kind of got over this initial hump of resistance and laid that foundation, it just got a lot easier. Like the kids stopped asking, they kind of accepted, okay, I'm not getting a smartphone. They also, like the parents, once they kind of had this conviction, it was like, well, we're just going to find a workaround with the soccer coach. Like you don't need to get a smartphone to be on this soccer team. Like we're going to talk to the coach. We'll find a workaround. And so
Right.
it was, yeah. And I think, and they also said it was always hardest with their first child to kind of
Yeah.
set that expectation. But then once they did, the younger siblings kind of got it. They're like, okay, in this family, we're not doing smartphones. Like I'm not even going to ask my parents. Like I know that
Right.
this is the decision. And so I think just recognizing, yes, there will be kind of some points of resistance to overcome. But once you do get over it, it does get a lot easier in the long term.
Right.
And just as a kind of practical note, we talked about this like 30-day detox, right? Because I think there are some
Yeah.
people who are not sure, right? They're like, I believe there is potential harm, but there's a lot that our kids are tangled up with. What is that? What does that resistance look like for them, let alone for me as a parent? Do you go in? I know you share some stories in there. Do you go into a potential plan for them to kind of do the tech exit? Do you have that as part of the conversation?
Something laid
there?
out.
Yeah, so
Recommendations, if you will?
that is kind of a whole chapter of the book is on detoxing. Because I actually assume that a lot of parents reading the book will have already given these screens to their kids or be wanting to find a way out. And the tech exit over the long term may even seem just a little bit daunting to people. And so I actually recommend like just start with a 30-day detox. Like I think anyone can commit to trying something for 30 days. And so I explain kind of like how to do that, how to set up a plan. I offer some examples of sample plans you can find through either a website, other communities where parents have done this before. So I really try to like break it down step by step for these parents. And what I will say is that just testing it out for yourself, I think will be incredibly powerful in trying to really commit to those 30 days. Because I think the first week is going to feel really hard, but I think you will be surprised at the results that you see in your kids when you make it to the full 30 days. And I'll just say a lot of the families I interviewed in my book, I think another misconception is, oh, these tech exit families, they started out this way. How fortunate for them that they had already figured this out. Kind of like it's too late for us. And a big message of the book is actually it's never too late. It's never too late to reverse course and make a change as a parent. To say, we didn't realize these things and now we do. And so we're going to make a pivot.
Yeah.
We're going to make a change. And some of these families who detoxed, they will tell you their kids were addicted to screens. They were on tablets most of the day. And so to them, it seemed actually impossible. Like some of these families said, it seemed impossible to us. We actually couldn't imagine dealing with this child without the tablet. But they just started with this 30-day digital detox. And we're really just honestly shocked to see how their son changed. That the first 2 weeks were hard, but then they got to 30 days and they were like, he's not even asking for the screen anymore. Like he's figured out how to play by himself. And so they were like, we're not going back. Like we've kind of found this freedom and we're just going to keep going over the long haul. And so I would just challenge parents who are nervous or afraid that they're not going to be able to do this to just try to start with a detox, come up with a plan, get your kids excited about it. Like this is going to be these 30 days. We're going to do all these fun activities as a family, not on screens, like get your spouse on board, put the plan on the wall next to your calendar, like explain the rationale to your kids, and then really invest a lot of time and energy as a parent in those 30 days to give your kids your time and attention and playing with them and engaging with them and doing these kind of screen-free activities. But then I think you'll be surprised when you reach 30 days, the skills your children have actually developed independently, and then use that as a launch kind of into doing this over the long term.
Claire, I love that. And I just want to encourage people listening to just seriously evaluate, talk to your spouse about doing a 30-day detox. You don't have to make the long-term commitment, but do the 30-day detox and be aware and sensitive of what's going on. What's your family dynamic? What's the kids before and then after? And really pour in during that time. I love that. Claire, if people want to connect, both to buy the book as well as to connect with you or your work, and other issues that they might be concerned with tech policy, where can they find out more information about you and the book you get?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. So the book, you can find it at thetechexit.com. It's available through wherever books are sold. But then I do want to just mention that the techexit.com does have some additional bonus resources for parents, including a discussion guide to accompany the book. I really encourage parents read this in community, find a few other families to do this with you, because one of the big things I do advocate for in the book is that it's a lot easier if you find just one or two other families to commit to doing the Tech Exit with you. It makes it easier on you as parents, and it helps your children also have friends who are not on smartphones and social media. And so use that discussion guide as a great tool to just invite other parents to embark on this journey with you, read the book together. I also, speaking about the detox, have a really practical tip sheet on the website of here are some ideas of screen-free activities you can do with your kids, of kids of different ages, because I recognize parents are busy. Often we're tired. We don't have inspiration or creativity all the time. And so those are just some practical resources. So that's all at thetechexit.com. And then to follow my writing and work, I continue to put out articles and resources, both related to policy, but also to parents and useful practical tips for them at claremorell.substack.com and then eppc.org. I have a project and scholar page on that website that also kind of collects all my writing and resources. So those are the three places I would direct people if they want to engage and follow more.
Awesome. Clare, this was so helpful. I think particularly the 30-day detox, everybody take a look at it, consider it, make that part of your life. Because even if you don't do it permanently,
That's right.
guarantee you will feel and your family will operate differently. Clare, thank you for your work. This is really important. Stay on the cutting edge, please. As parents, please stay there. Keep fighting the good fight, and thanks for writing this book.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
So I know that was a lot of information in there, which is why you should probably buy the book.
That's right.
But here are 6 key takeaways that after listening to it that I think everybody should remember. So first of all, putting limits on something automatically implies harm. So think about, why are we choosing to expose our children to something that is harmful? So that's something to think about. And this, I thought, I did not realize, is that the dopamine that is released in our children affects your brain like drugs. And it is designed to never give satisfaction. So there'll never be enough. The more dopamine hits there are, the more cravings it produces. And that is actually kind of scary.
Yeah, and that's what we need to be aware of as parents, is that there is a lot that is coming at our kids, and this is where, as parents, we need to protect our kids from things that they really shouldn't be. Again, she's going all in on the tech exit, but the reality is you need to be aware of these things regardless of what your decision is and how tech-free you are going to be.
Yeah, speaking of tech-free, one frustration I've had is screens in schools. I don't know. I'm like a purist. I don't think kids should have screens at all in schools, except maybe to watch a educational
or in high
video
school
or something.
where they're using it for word.
Even in high school, I think the argument could be made, but still, but I asked her about that, and she said that screens in schools, math and readings are at all-time low. So hello, teachers, administrators, get the screens out of the classroom until they're teenagers, probably.
Yeah. And then the other part is really about replacing screen time with responsibility. It takes the place of responsibilities and tasks in our kids' lives, as well as hobbies and play. I mean, we've talked about this before, that technology is a experience suck, like
experience blocker,
right? And it takes us away. And I felt this, remember when I used to be on screens or using video games, where you'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I just spent the last 2 hours in this.
You could be doing other things.
It feels like you're in another world.
Right.
And so recognizing that happens to adults as well as to kids, that it really mitigates and reduces their connection with hobbies and other things of leisure and true recreation. And then, which kind of leads to the next one, it makes you feel like you don't need other people. And
they're isolating. Screens are isolating.
And it has a kind of an inherently breaking down of community. Again, we aren't a purists, on complete tech-free, obviously. But the reality is that it does undermine the very need we have, a very human, authentic, God-given need for people, for community. And it creates it gives us a false substitute
Exactly.
to that.
And last, it's really important that we communicate to our kids. Life isn't about being entertained. Like entertainment is like the Smarties, like the little candies that are like really great to have, but you can't live on them. And our life is not about being constantly amused. We need time for reflection, for activity, and for boredom. So in your home, maybe there's a great opportunity to talk with your spouse. Are you happy with the screen time use in your home? And then are we happy with our own screen time use, like we as parents? And what can we do about that?
Yeah. So again, if you want to check out Clare's book, we'll link to that here as well. Highly recommend it. Really interesting, fascinating read. And it's an important topic for us as families to really discuss. Yeah. And again, if you want to sign up for Alicia's webinar for moms, make sure you do it right away. Get on the list. And then hopefully we can see you as we travel around. And as we say always, right? If you see us, please come up and say hi. We'd love to meet you. And until next time, may the Lord bless you.